Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg,
Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia,
and essayist and commentator Eric Lavine on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the county chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party, as well as the vice chair of the New York State Party. With us is our co-host, Eric Lavine, noted attorney, commentator, an essayist, and I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. So, gentlemen, another week. It's never boring, always interesting stuff happening in the world, in the state, in New York City, out on Long Island, all across America. I want to begin with an Iran talks update. So much is at stake, and at this moment in time, so much at stake, but so little accomplished. Trump is right when he said in 2016 that Iran has never won a war, but has never lost a negotiation. And I'm asking the question, will he remember that wisdom? Let me tell you what troubles me. It's been troubling me for weeks now. People are dying. They're dying by the thousands and thousands. The latest report is that they have nearly beaten to death the Nobel Prize winner, a woman who's a dissident against the totalitarian theocratic despotism. And in prison, she's in prison, and they've beaten her so severely that it's a question of now life and death or serious permanent impairment. They've gone to, it's now reported they're going to hospitals where demonstrators were in hospital beds and had been summarily executed by bullets to the brain. This is serious business. So when Trump says, we have your back, help is on the way, you can't keep saying that and putting people's lives at risk. So the answer is, well, the people stopped demonstrating. They stopped demonstrating because you have these death squads running around the streets shooting anybody who looks like they may be protesting. Plus they have tanks all over the city, outside people's homes and community centers. Give me a break. These people are awful. They're despots. They're dangerous. They're dangerous not only to the Iranian people, but to the entire Middle East, to Europe, and indeed to Western civilization. Something has to be done. Will Trump remember the wisdom? Don't get jerked around by the negotiations. The negotiations is just a strategy to buy time where they re-up their ballistic missile program, where they feed money to their terrorist proxies, while they play games trying to reconstitute their nuclear program. The Mullahs must go. The Mullahs must go. The Mullahs must go. Trump has now moved in another aircraft carrier into the region. He met with Netanyahu at the White House. I don't know what was said because I was not a fly on the wall, nor was invited either as a person or a fly. But I will tell you, a lot is at stake. Now, Netanyahu said he will join this Board of Peace. I'm not happy about this Board of Peace. I think it's a joke. It's populated by Turkey, by Qatar, by Pakistan, other enemies of Israel and the United States. I guess Netanyahu believes it's better to be in the room than outside the room. What he can do inside the room is beyond me. But the fact is, Gaza is still in the hands of Hamas. They have to be gotten rid of. One way to get rid of Hamas is to get rid of Iran. Eric, your thoughts?
Well, there's a lot going on that we don't see, that we're not privy to. But let me first make this observation before I respond factually to what I think is going on. So we don't know the exact number of people that the Iranian regime have bludgeoned to death, shot to death, hanged, or tortured and killed. But it's somewhere between 25,000 and 70,000 people in basically a month's time. In over 2 years of war, in a war of self-defense and a war of national survival, Israel, there was roughly 70,000 deaths in Gaza, and on a ratio of 1-to-1 of combatants to civilians. Unfortunately, civilians die, but that's true of in any war. And you got to keep in mind when the United States, when America was in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we were doing counterinsurgencies and counterterrorism in places like Fallujah, the ratio was roughly 3 civilians to 1 combatant, 2.5 to 1 combatant. The Israelis, you ask any American military leader who knows anything about fighting terrorism in an urban setting, they will tell you a 1-to-1 ratio is extraordinary. Were the protests? We're the protesters about Iran. This is a regime. Every person that they've killed in the streets of Tehran, Isfahan, these are all civilians, 100% of them, not a single combatant. And these are their own people. But there's silence from the kafir Nazis. There's silence from Israel's critics. So, once again, I'll remind you, when these people take to the streets and they're protesting Israel, they're not protesting what's going on in Gaza. They're just protesting the existence of Jews. Putting that aside. When I say there's a lot going on that we don't know about, and Richard, you make the point about time, it's an open question whether Iran is buying time or Trump is buying time. Remember, we already have the Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier strike force in the Gulf, but now we've also sent the George H.W. Bush aircraft carrier strike force, and it's on its way. You don't send these kinds of military assets. You send them. Obviously, people should be scared of it and should make people want to do things to ward off an attack. But you don't send them there just for the sake of it. So while these supposed negotiations are ongoing, Trump is putting in place a tremendous number of military assets, both offensively and defensively, because we are very concerned, legitimately so, that Iran has a huge ballistic missile program, ballistic missiles, thanks to Barack Obama and Joe Biden and John Kerry and the JCPOA, that put American service members in the Middle East in harm's way, Israel in harm's way, our Gulf allies in harm's way. We want to be able to defend them. So it's an open question whether or not the Iranians are buying time or whether Trump is buying time. So that's the first question. The second question is, Richard, to your point of what is Trump doing? Here, the Iranians, he claims he wants to make a deal, but I don't know how he can make a deal because we're insisting that any deal include no enrichment in Iran, that there be no ballistic missile program, and that they give up on their support for terrorism in the region. The Iranians refuse to talk about anything other than the nuclear program, and they refuse to give up in total enrichment on Iranian territory. So what they wanted the negotiation to be about is how much enrichment can they do in Iran. It's like being on the 1 yard line in one end zone and the 1 yard line at the other end zone. There's going to be no way to bridge that gap. I continue to believe that it is Trump who is buying time because there's no way the Iranians are even going to be able to meet the minimum requirement of this administration. The other thing to keep in mind, obviously, since we are Iran with this ballistic missile program is a tremendous threat. The good news is, and it also increases the likelihood that there will be an attack, is that you make the point that Hamas is in Gaza. Yeah, but they don't control Gaza. The Israelis completely surround them, and you're starting to see a step up in Israeli military activity against Hamas because Hamas is going to be disarmed one way or another. That is absolutely going to happen. There are no hostages there, so it can give the Israelis much more of a free hand. But Hamas doesn't really pose a threat to Israel anymore. And Hezbollah, because remember, the Iranians were setting up this ring of fire. They were in Gaza, they were in Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Yemen with the Houthis, and Iran itself. So Gaza, they're neutralized. Hezbollah has been neutered literally and figuratively. Hezbollah is in a very difficult position. If the Iranians do attack the Israelis, they're going to want Hezbollah to join this war. But Hezbollah is in Lebanon. They don't need any more trouble from the Lebanese government, the Lebanese military. They've also basically been neutered. And Israel is there, and Israel knows where they are, and they know they'll be wiped out. So the likelihood that Hezbollah will join the fray is minimal. The ability of the terrorist organizations in Iraq and Syria, of course, Assad is now out of Syria, and the ability of the Syrians to be attacking the Israelis has almost been completely eliminated. There are no military forces south of Damascus. Israel has moved into what used to be Syria portion of the Golan Heights, so there's very little that can come out of Syria, and Iraq is kind of far away and having its own little problems. So that leaves you kind of with the Houthis, who may be able to lob in a ballistic missile here and there, but to no real great effect. So Iran's going to be in this alone. But the one thing to keep in mind, anyone who thinks that the concept of MAD, mutual assured destruction, which kept the Soviet Union and the United States from nuclear war, applies here is out of their minds. It means you don't understand who the Iranians are. This is a nihilistic death cult. They would rather die than surrender. They're prepared to have the regime destroyed because they just won't give up on their goals. Because if they give up the nuclear program, if they give up the ballistic missile program, if they give up the funding of terrorism, if they give up the war against the United States, the great Satan, and Israel, the little Satan, then the regime has been destroyed. That's suicide. So this regime is much more prepared. They're going to say you're going to have to come kill us before we're going to allow you to kill ourselves through a negotiation. So they're prepared to maintain whatever nuclear program they have, and they are prepared to launch a ballistic missiles at Israel, at American service members, at our Arab allies. They're prepared to do as much harm as they possibly can and have the regime destroyed than to give up. That's really the fear. But you have to preempt it. And a regime that is that diabolical, that is that evil, that is that nihilistic, those regimes cannot be allowed to exist because they can't be reasoned with and they can't be contained. So President Trump has a unique opportunity to really make the world much safer. Now, that's not going to say this is going to be with no deaths on either side. I expect there'll be a lot of deaths in Iran, hopefully primarily the IRGC and the mullahs and the other members of the military. But there's going to be dead and wounded on our side as well. But I think the numbers are obviously going to be very disproportionate. But most importantly, if you don't have that fight's going to come, whether it's today, a decade from now, or 20 years from now. And now we are in absolutely the best position to take out Iran. President Trump has put the United States in a great position to win, to defend Western civilization, and he should do it.
Jesse, your thoughts?
Thank you. I may go through a sneezing fit, so I apologize. Excuse my voice because we just had the state convention and there was a lot of talking and encouraging from various podiums. Excuse me, I apologize. I think that we should also, and I want to pick up on what both of you two esteemed gentlemen had stated about this. The one thing I think we understand about this president is that he does not give away his true plans. He is always planning, and there's always something in the background, whether it be diplomatically, economically, militarily. You both have spoken about the placement of 2 aircraft carrier groups in the area. There's only one reason for that purpose to be required, and that is not only a show of force, but a show of force that will be used, and the United States under this president, Donald Trump, has already demonstrated its use of force when it comes to Iran, and in cooperation and collaboration with the state of Israel. You know, in his conversations, he floats his own thoughts. He also floats what other individuals should do, other nations should do and be careful about. And he also issues ultimatums. As for the meeting with Netanyahu just earlier this week, I think it was a good meeting. I think any time and every time that we can take an opportunity to show unity between the United States and Israel, it is not a signal so much to the world, it's a signal to the enemies of both our countries, of this united front, and a reminder that it was a joint United States-Israeli force that went out and neutralized those the nuclear capability of Iran and such. I think that what we have to do here is, listen, time is not on the side of the innocent Iranian residents. That's true. But first and foremost, I think that this president does not want to make the same mistakes of previous administrations where there was no plan following taking some action, and he's going to be very deliberate. And if someone who has been criticized as being shooting from the hip, when it comes to issues of national security and these engagements, he has been very deliberate. He is speaking about a deal, and I think that, I think really honestly, when he talks about a deal with Iran, we're not looking at the deal for the sake of making a deal like the Biden administration or the Obama administration. It's got to be a deal that works. But ultimately, as Eric and you both pointed out, these are not people you can deal with. This is not in their mentality. It's not in their psyche. They will kill themselves, or they'll have someone come and kill them first and such. They're not going to go away quietly, and they're not going to go away peacefully. It's going to be a violent jolt that's going to require this. But I think that while the United States, and maybe that's a good question, the best question I was asked, the talk of a deal and negotiations, is that for the benefit of Israel, of Iran, or is that for the benefit of the United States? I think that is for the benefit of the United States. I think that, we have, the pundits have criticized this president for acting too quickly, and they've criticized this president for acting too slowly. He has been right on the mark when it comes to the Israeli and the Middle East situation, in Iran specifically. I think time's going to ferret that out. It's unfortunate, but, we're about 50 years into this regime. This regime's got to go. The mullah's got to go. A free Iran needs to happen. We need to make sure that they do not have nuclear weapons or capabilities to use missiles to strike our allies in the Middle East, and that's going to take a little bit of time. But what I am looking hopeful for is a number of points that the world needs to see, and I think more importantly, our enemies see. They see Netanyahu and Trump together. They see a show of mighty force with 2 aircraft carrier groups in the area. There has been very plain talk. But if that talk eventually comes to an end, and I wouldn't be surprised that in the middle of some negotiations, in indirect negotiations, a military action takes place. It's going to be, President Bush talking about shock and awe. I think that's what Donald Trump has probably trademarked that when it comes to the Middle East and his foreign policy, utilizing his military capabilities.
Thanks, Jesse. We have to take a break now. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Lavine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. We'll be back in but a few moments with more important and interesting conversations. Please stay with us.
Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg,
Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia,
and essayist and commentator Eric Lavine on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back on Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the New York State Republican Party and the County Chair of the party in Suffolk County, Long Island. With us, our co-host, noted attorney, commentator, essayist Eric Lavine, and I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Shifting gears, but not emphasis, let's talk about what happened in Venezuela. To President Trump's credit, he eliminated Mr. Maduro, who's a dictator in that narco-terrorist state. Had a relationship with Iran, with China, with Russia, undermined democratic and free-loving people in all of Latin America, totally undermined the Monroe Doctrine, which said that the United States has primacy of what goes on in our hemisphere for the national security interests of the United States and, in fact, the world. And the fact that you can take out Maduro is a very big deal because you want to do this because it only allows other places in Latin America, Central America, South America to go and have a burst of freedom, but also undermines the axis of evil of China, Russia, and Iran, who are operating in our hemisphere. So it's a big deal to get rid of Mr. Maduro himself. I respectfully submit to you that the Maduro regime, the players, the power players, the dictators are still there in the form of his vice president, who's now the acting president.
Delcy Rodriguez.
And Ms. Rodriguez is a formidable player in her own right, and there's a political game going on between her and whatever the gentleman's name is, who is and I say gentleman loosely, who's the head of the secret police and the terror squad, the enforcer-in-chief in that state. And I don't know who's going to win that fight. If the United States backs her, then I think that's a positive vis-a-vis the comparison. I think the real positive has to be to rid the country of Venezuela from the Maduro faction, the Chavez faction, the communist faction, the drug-dealing faction, the terrorist ally, the suppressor of freedom of their own people. And then you have something. Now, how long Trump is going to play her out until he gets what he wants, I don't know. This cannot be solely a deal about getting Venezuelan oil. Let me repeat that. It cannot be just about Venezuelan oil. It has to be about regime change there. That's a common theme that I'll articulate with respect to Iran. It's nice to have won something but you need to have regime change. You can have fundamental change, because remember this, Donald Trump is not going to be president forever. We're in midterm elections. We'll talk a little later on and in the weeks and months ahead about the midterm elections. No guarantees that the Speaker of the House next calendar year will be Speaker Johnson, a wonderful man and a great leader. There's no guarantee that John Thune, the majority leader of the United States Senate, a great man, wonderful man, great leader, will be in place. I'm hopeful that both Thune and Johnson retain the majority of Republicans there, because we need to have Trump-backed. Also, these are common sense guys, and they work towards Trump's better instincts and his better angels. And that's important, because Trump needs common sense, rational people, because as much good that he does, he also undermines himself on various issues and statements, and that's a problem. So he needs to have common sense people like Johnson and Thune in place. And if they're gone, you can be sure that what the Democratic Party will do, what these raving idiots will do, is they will have investigations, they'll have impeachment, they'll totally stymie his ability to get his agenda accomplished. His appointments of officials, his agenda. Every day he works an agenda to try to help the American people and secure national security for us. And I think it's very, very important that we get rid of the Maduro faction. So, Jesse, what are your thoughts on my view about the Monroe Doctrine and the Maduro faction in Venezuela? You have the expertise with respect to Latin America.
Well, I don't know if I would call it expertise, except maybe a rich history, a personal history in the area. I agree with a lot that you have said. It can't be just about oil. I don't think it's going to be about oil, but let's be honest, it's going to be about oil. I think that if we want to summarize this action in Venezuela in maybe three terms, it would be like this. It was right and just. Maduro had to go. That narco-terrorist country had to be stopped in what it was dealing with, the new axis of evil that we were dealing with China, Russia, Iran, and whatnot, and North Korea, excuse me. So I think that's number one. Number two is the re-implementation and the recommitment to the Monroe Doctrine to not allow these regimes to be within our hemisphere. And I think it would be, I think it would be naive to think that one of the largest oil reserves in the world is not part of this. Prior to the ascension of Maduro, U.S. had great investments in the oil industry in that area. That oil industry should recoup its investments, and because Maduro was not utilizing the resources properly, that industry was operating at a true a pittance of what it actually should be producing. And who is that hurting? That's hurting globally, the global markets, of course. It's hurting the United States national security. But it's also hurting the Venezuelan people, which was a prosperous country just about 25, 30 years ago, before Maduro came into power, the narco-terrorists came into power. I think that, again, as President Trump has stated, he doesn't want a forever war, and that we've seen in the past with a regime change, and we've seen them in other regions, such as Iraq and Afghanistan. I think the United States is going to look to control the oil industry there, upgrade it, and use its proceeds for the people of Venezuela and for maybe whatever investments the United States is placing there, either as the government or whatnot. And what most importantly is to cut off a resource to our enemies, to cut off crude oil to countries like Russia and China and others, because at the same time you have countries like China and others that are withholding access to critical minerals. Right now we're seeing open rallies that we haven't seen in many years before, on the people coming wanting to chart their own course. The key to this regime is going to be U.S. business. It's going to be the U.S. business industry and such. It's going to be the oil industry. Just recently, we've seen reports that China bought Venezuelan oil. They bought Venezuelan oil with the approval and from the United States. It's going to be interesting. I know that Secretary Wright our energy secretary is going to be visiting Venezuela, and to take a first-hand account there, and to once again re-emphasize the policies and the promotions of the Trump administration. But honestly, and this is a very long-winded answer to a very complex situation that can be boiled down to our listeners. Simply watch Secretary of State Marco Rubio's presentation on the Hill just about 2 weeks ago when it comes to Venezuela. It is a class, a master class in
a tour de force.
Yes, a tour de force. Thank you, Eric. It was an amazing presentation, a master class, a tour de force, to steal your line, on the Trump administration's policies, and rebuking while at the same time advancing those policies on the Hill, being very clear what those policies are, and not allowing the Democrats who just want to oppose anything that is related to the Trump administration, even something good, what it is. And I have to tell you, one of the best exchanges came when Marco Rubio, and it's a different subject but similar, was asked, will you say now that the Trump administration will not seek a regime change? Marco Rubio didn't, give the tacit, diplomatic, long-winded answer. He looked at the senator. He looked at him like, you're an idiot, and because he was this Democrat, and he basically says, no, we're not going to say that. In fact, we want regime change in Cuba. We want to remove dictators with ties to communists and socialist countries and the enemies of the United States out from our region.
That's a great, Jesse, that's a great point. That's a great point. Because you knock out Venezuela, you're going to knock out Cuba.
Exactly. And we do know that from reports that what President Trump did in Venezuela was basically overcome Cuban strategists and their secret police and their military strategists. So, who were based in Venezuela because of close ties between those two dictatorships. So, I think that, anybody, you really want to get an idea of what's happening in Venezuela, you want to get an idea of what's happening in Cuba, you want to get an idea of the recommitment to the Monroe Doctrine by President Trump, Google and go on YouTube, take a look at the masterclass by the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, during his presentation on the Hill about 2 weeks ago.
Eric.
First let me say something about this concept of forever war. I know it's a very popular term. It makes no sense to me. The United States needs to be where the United States needs to be for as long as it needs to be there. If our national security interest is served by being in a part of the world with military force, military presence, then we need to be there. And you don't just stay there gratuitously, but the American-led world order was not defended since the end of World War II because we were concerned about how long we were going to be in a particular place. We're still in Germany. We're still in Japan. We're still in Korea. So I just don't understand. I know it's a popular thing to throw out there and say the forever war because, look at Iraq and, look at Afghanistan. Americans, nobody was dying in Afghanistan when Joe Biden unilaterally catastrophically surrendered. Americans were not dying there. We had 2,000 troops, but it advanced our national security interest to remain there. But people still pointed to it and said there's a forever war. But it was one of the...
Just to clarify, I think that the difference here is the difference between the Cold War and the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq is I think there was no plan after the initial... honestly, there are two presidents that I respect greatly. A president I respect greatly. But I don't think that they had a plan after removing the leadership there, removing the regime. It got sogged down. Unlike where in World War II, where we began the creation of NATO and moving forward.
And the Marshall Plan.
But we
also have to be careful about overlearning our lesson. And Venezuela may be an example of that. One of the huge mistakes when we attacked Iraq was the complete de-Baathification of the government. That meant all levels of government, from Saddam Hussein, to the public librarian. Everybody was removed if you were a Baathist. the mistake was we should have just been decapitating the regime, taking out the upper echelon, but leaving the bureaucrats in place so the states can function and wouldn't require this overwhelming American rebuilding of the state. Now, what we have in Venezuela is we've removed, and this is part to Richard's point, we've removed Maduro, but Delcy Rodriguez, his vice president, is there, so it's roughly the same regime. And we want to be able to, sell oil, have Venezuelan oil open to the world. No American oil company is going to invest in Venezuela unless there's stability in Venezuela, political stability in Venezuela. And there will not be political stability in Venezuela so long as Delcy Rodriguez and Maduro's other thugs remain in power. So going back to the de-Baathification over learning that lesson, I still think we need to be removing Delcy Rodriguez and the other upper levels of the Venezuelan government, but leaving in place the bureaucrats. Venezuela has a history of a court system, of a functioning government, functioning democracy before Chavez destroyed it, and allow the Venezuelan people to build their country back up. It may require some American presence for a while, but I don't think it'll be indefinite. But unless you can bring political stability to Venezuela, all these investments and all these oil companies that we want to go back there, they're just not going to happen. And to that same point, Jesse, point I agree with 100%, this weakens the axis of evil. Venezuela is very much, under the Maduro regime and his henchmen, is very much part of the China, Russia, North Korea, Iran axis of evil. Venezuela is kind of a vortex. They're all there. The Iranians are there. The Hezbollah is there. Cuba's there. To your point, roughly 19 Cuban security guards were killed in the American operation extracting Maduro. And if Cuba falls, that really opens up all kinds of possibilities for the Cuban people in Latin America. But unless we can bring political stability, and only a functioning democracy in Venezuela can do that, I am concerned that what President Trump is attempting to achieve will be unachievable. So I think Delcy can't stay. Delcy Rodriguez can't stay. That regime's got to go.
I agree with that. So let's take a break. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Lavine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. We'll be back in but a few moments with more interesting and important conversation in our third and final segment of today's show. Please stay with us.
Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg,
Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia,
and essayist and commentator Eric Lavine on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We are back on Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Lavine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. So, Jesse, I want to talk to you about, you had the privilege and pleasure as being the vice chair of the state party as well as the county chair in Suffolk, which is one of the leading county organizations in the state. I submit, as an outsider looking in to the Republican Party, I would submit that Nassau and Suffolk and a couple other places are really the strength of the Republican Party in the state. I'm very concerned about the survival of the state of New York. I'm concerned for a couple of reasons. Number one, as far as I'm concerned, as the House Democrat, the Democratic Party, the traditional Democratic Party that I grew up in, whose values I believed in, the party of Hubert Humphrey and Jack Kennedy and Scoop Jackson, Walter Mondale, people like that party is dead or dying right now. The Democratic Party, certainly in New York State, and there's movement all across the country, is being taken over by the so-called Democratic Socialists. They are not Democrats, they are Socialists. And some of them are even more rabid than just mere Socialists. A lot of them are close to being communists or anarchists. And they have taken over the traditional Democratic Party. They're the tail that wags the dog.
They're not the tail. They are the dog.
They are it's a mean, ugly, dangerous dog, as it is. And I'm a dog lover, folks. Okay. So I asked this question. What does this mean for the future of the state? And related to that is, unfortunately, we do not have a two-party system in the state of New York. We certainly don't have a two-party system in the city of New York. You do have it in places like Suffolk and Nassau County and a few upstate counties. The problem with this, and Jesse and Eric and I have talked about this, as a matter of real concern to me. Kathy Hochul and the hacks in the state legislature, the Assembly and the Senate, pushed through a law, dangerous law, making the local elections in the even number years with the more general elections, which undermines the ability of the Republican Party to have leadership and control of the local governments, whether it's the county legislators and the county office holders, whether it's the town boards, the town councils. This is a real problem because there are 3 million more Democrats registered in the state of New York than Republicans, and we're on our way to having if we don't already have a dictatorship of one party, which is always dangerous. So, Jesse, what are your thoughts and what's your report from the convention in Garden City that you just had?
Yeah, I just want to say that there is a great dichotomy between the two conventions. The Democrats were in Syracuse on Friday and Saturday of last week, and you never heard a peep from them. There was nothing in the mainstream media. There was very little social media presence. It's almost like the Democrats wanted to just slink away, not let anybody know they were gathering, not let them see their problems where, as you said, the anarchists have taken over the traditional Democratic Party here in the state of New York. The only thing that did pop out was, as we discussed off air, that on their party platform, they want to legislate and actually make, through legislation, New York a sanctuary state, something that we've opposed to. And at any point, by executive order or removal of an executive order,
I'm afraid that they're going to push it through Jesse, my concern is that Kathy Hochul, who'll do anything to get herself reelected, is going to push that through
she has
the legislation.
That by embracing, she has certainly done that by embracing Zoran Mamani. I mean, his endorsement finally came in for her as the Democratic convention began. Certainly the AOCs of the world. So right now, the Democratic Socialists of New York run the party. As Eric pointed out, they're the dog. The traditional Democrats that have been the stalwarts of this party, the opposition party, are now the tail, and they don't wag anything. They may wag all the dissent from bad, very bad legislation. That's basically what they do. But in the Republican Garden City, and I got to give great credit, because if it was said once, it was said several hundred times during the Republican convention that kicked off with a rally with almost 1,000 people in Garden City on Monday night. And then myself and Joe Cairo, the chairman of the Nassau County Republican Committee, and his home county executive, Bruce Blakeman, was nominated on Wednesday to be unanimously the Republican governor. And he also has the conservative nomination as well. That it was filled with energy. One of the things we spoke about is that it's a teamwork. The success that we have here in Suffolk is not just by one person. It's by a team of elected officials and committee members and volunteers and like-minded individuals. The same goes for Nassau County under Joe Cairo. And Long Island, as you said, is a bastion of a Republican operation. There's two teammates, two co-captains there. Those co-captains are Joe Cairo, who's also a national committee member, and probably regarded, from my point, he's a friend first and a mentor. He is regarded as the best Republican Party county chairman in the country, if not the state of
It's the second best, Jesse. He's the second.
Co-equal best with you, Jesse.
He's the best. He's the best because we do it together. So in saying that, here's the thing: in New York, in Garden City, we gathered hundreds of state committee members. We went even further more with almost 1,000 volunteers, onlookers, supporters. The energy was palpable. I mean, the Garden City Hotel was rocking with great energy, great music, great speakers the entire time. I mean, we saw it in all our local media outlets. We saw it on social media. We saw that the unity that we are moving, we're unified. As we go forward. We had a great kickoff to this, where he now serves as the EPA administrator, Lee Zeldin. But Lee Zeldin came within a whisker of becoming governor 4 years ago. And regardless of everything else, or what you want to say about the highlights of an outstanding career in public service and in politics, Lee Zeldin should be regarded in one way. He delivered a Republican House majority in 2022, and it came right through New York, and it was emanated out of his campaign. So as we go forward here, we see that the Democrats are now captured by the Democratic Party, is now captured by the Democratic Socialists. It's a left-wing operation that leaves, its policies lead to literally death. Here's Zoran Mamani, who said he's not going to remove the homeless encampments and bring those, tragic individuals who, for financial reasons, maybe from addictions, maybe from mental diseases. He did not bring them into warming shelters or anything else. He left them outside to die. 18 of them have lost their lives because of Zoran Mamani. And now you can see that the shine has come off the rose a bit now. Those are the examples we're going to put forward. It was an amazing presentation in Garden City over the last 3 days, where we were able to demonstrate and highlight the course for success, the course to save New York, and to break the one-party rule. That's by controlling and lowering taxes, backing our cops, by hiring more cops, prosecutors, and detectives, and emboldening them with tough new laws and repealing bad ones like cashless bail. And of course, to end the green scam that wants to end all, natural gas and oil from our hookups and new constructions and force it into, could you imagine electric buses running in 10 degree below weather that we've been experiencing?
No, you can't imagine it because it's an impossibility.
Possibility. I think it actually did happen in some cases.
And they catch, New York. And don't forget, they catch fire too under those circumstances.
Yes, they do. So it was going to be good. We are going to prosecute. Bruce Blakeman is going to prosecute the case and highlight policies that have been successful in a purple county. Even though it's dominated by Republicans, Democrats out-register Republicans by 110,000 individuals in the county of Nassau. And what did Bruce Blakeman do? In 2021, he knocked off a sitting incumbent Democrat, popular, who made the stupidity and the arrogance of putting forward $120 million tax increase on the taxpayers. Bruce Blakeman campaigned and successfully rejected and reversed that tax increase. And he's also going to identify the highlights in criminal safety, because they're one of the safest, if not the safest, county in the country, against that of the failures of Kathy Hochul. So, the best thing that was said is by the last Republican governor, who said when he announced he was running for governor in 1994, and everyone was looking around saying to themselves, and at least in our circles, I remember, because I was working campaigns back then, and the New Yorkers did too, what's a Pataki? But George Pataki, by the end of that election, everyone knew who George Pataki was. He was the first Republican governor in a generation in the state of New York, and he defeated a legendary Mario Cuomo. So we see a lot of similarities. We're going to be building upon the work that was done by Lee Zeldin in 2022. We know the path to go there. We know where our weaknesses are. We know where our strengths are, and we're going to build on both on those issues. And the fact that we have someone who is of the Jewish faith who can once again go into those communities and break the members of the Jewish community away from Democrats again, because I just don't understand how anyone, and Eric, I hope I'm not.
Well, I'm going to turn this over to Eric, because he's the other Republican in the studio.
Yeah.
I'm being the Democrat.
I don't understand how any member of the Jewish faith could ever vote Democrat after what the Democrats continue to do to Israel and the Jewish people here.
Yeah, I'll be the first to admit I don't understand my co-religionists who vote Democratic, but I'm glad you had a great experience at the Garden City Hotel. The last time I was there was for a wedding, and the room was supposed to be ready at 3, and it wasn't ready until 5, and we almost missed the ceremony. But putting that aside, I don't want to disparage the Garden City Hotel.
I like the Garden City Hotel.
I've been there. Beautiful.
It's a great hotel.
It's beautiful. They were just having trouble with their linen, but putting that aside for a moment.
Well, you should have phoned Jesse, and he would have taken care of it.
He would have taken care of us, exactly. I wish I shared, Jesse's optimism. I just simply don't. Look, I support Bruce Blakeman. I'm going to vote for Bruce Blakeman. I think he'd be a fantastic governor. Polls are not looking good. Unfortunately, the Republican Party statewide is not as strong as we would like. It really doesn't exist at all in New York City. And we have to find ways to try and, since Republicans are having trouble winning statewide elections, we have to find a way to try and bring the Democratic Party back to normalcy. And one thing I might suggest, at least in New York City, because you do have strongholds for Republicans in Suffolk and Nassau, in no small part to the great work of the Republican leadership there, Jesse. But in New York City, in the 5 boroughs, I think registered Republicans have to start giving very serious thought to registering as Democrats and voting in Democratic primaries, because the general elections are decided in the primaries. And if Republicans are going to have any role, at least in New York City, they're going to have to start voting in those primaries. Zoran Mamani was able to win. And let's be clear, on my view on Zoran Mamani. He's a communist. He's a Jew hater. He's a really bad guy. And the fact that 18 people froze to death, he just really doesn't care, because it's not about governing, it's about revolution. It's not about people coming from around the world, immigrating to the United States and becoming Americans. It's about people coming to the United States and fundamentally changing America. It's about revolution for someone like that. So we need to stop people like Zoran Mamdani. We need to stop the Democratic Socialists of America that have taken over the Democratic Party. And really, we have to start thinking strategically. Democrats do it all the time. They try to screw up Republican primaries by either registering in Republican primaries or supporting candidates that will make it more.
Mondami's team had the socialists register in the Democratic Party.
Right, exactly.
Democratic primary.
Right, and exactly. Republicans, I think, citywide need to start abandoning the Republican Party in primaries. They're free to vote however they want to vote in the general election. But if we want to start moving the city and the state back to the center, our votes have to count. And right now in primaries, in cities in places like New York, where the primaries decide the general election, we don't count. So I think we have to start as I said, we have to start registering the Democratic Party so we can vote in the primaries. Statewide, I wish Bruce Blakeman the greatest of luck. I think he's a fabulous candidate. I agree with most of his platforms and his positions. I can't think of a thing that Kathy Hochul does other than she's banning phones from being in schools through the day. Other than that, I can't really think of anything I agree with her on. She's a horrible governor. She's boring. She's not particularly bright. She's weak. She's owned by Mamdani. She's owned by the Democratic Socialists. But she's up by the most recent poll, 30 points? Something crazy like that. Now, I have no doubt that Blakeman's going to narrow that gap, but that's a very, very heavy lift. So I think we have to start at basics, and start of the basics is we have to start bringing everything back to the center, and at least for ground zero of New York City, I think we have to start playing in the Democratic primary, making it more difficult for zealots, revolutionaries, evil people. I will be out there and say it. I think Zoran Mamdani is an evil guy, and that we need to start removing these people from positions of power and moving back to the center. And we have to start thinking strategically about how we're going to do that.
Jesse, do you want to respond to Eric's comments?
Well, it's not unlikely. It's not new that a Republican would be down early in the game of a statewide race here in the state of New York. That not only didn't happen in 2022 with Lee Zeldin, it also occurred in 1994 with Governor Pataki. The state has changed from 94 to 2026. That is true. But here's the thing.
The Blakeman voters have left the state. There are fewer of us. They've gone to Florida and North Carolina.
There was another huge difference besides policy that was discussed in the Republican state convention that you did not hear, nor would you ever hear in the Democrat state convention or any convention of the Democratic Party right now. It's an appeal for Republicans, not only to the unaffiliated voters, but to Democrats from their grandfathers and their fathers' party who cannot recognize them, who are sick and tired of the Mandamis of the world, who are sick and tired of the AOCs of the world, who are sick and tired of the policies that now are making them less safe. And now you have Democrats reaching into their pockets, not into just Long Island taxpayers, but throughout the state of New York, Westchester, and up in the North Country, the Hudson Valley, the Central District, and so on, and the Southern Tier, and more. They realize these issues, and they've now fought Kathy Hochul. See, Kathy Hochul, right or wrong, came in late in the campaign in 2022 when then Andrew Cuomo resigned, and the campaign had to shift a bit. And so I do believe that, and I can assess that voters were still, especially in New York City, going to give Kathy Hochul that opportunity and that chance. And that may have had a small impact. And in a race decided by a few 100,000 votes, that's tantamount. Here, it is, you cannot blame Andrew Cuomo. You cannot blame anybody else. Everything from the endorsements of Mamani to congestion pricing and lying to the people of New York City and the surrounding communities about congestion pricing by suspending it for the purposes of pure politics to try and secure a Democratic majority in the House, and then only once again to, reinstate it literally a week after Election Day. We're seeing the same thing on the ban of natural gas and oil on new construction. She's trying to pause that because she's trying to get to her election. I don't know if it was Eric or the judge that said this, but I think you both agree with it. She is a political partisan animal that has one mission and one mission only: to get herself elected. And it does not matter who's in her way or what she needs to do or who she needs to embrace and what policy she needs to embrace.
Right, I agree with you.
She's going to do that.
I agree with you. She's a horror show, and she's weak, and she's craven, and she'll do whatever she has to do. But because she has been so successful in forcing moderates and Republicans out of the state, New York City has even a larger proportion of the statewide vote. And that's where her base is, and that's where Zoran Mamani is going to help her get out the vote. And that's why we have to start normalizing and moderating.
We have the ability to do coalition building.
Right, okay.
But the ability to do coalition building once again, as started by Lee Zeldin when he went into the Asian community.
I love Lee Zeldin. Lee's a personal friend of mine, and he was spectacular, and I worked real hard to try to get him elected. My point is that in the 4 years that Kathy Hochul's been there since, the state there's a beginning of a death spiral, and part of that death spiral is that taxpayers and people who contribute to our society are leaving in droves, and those are Republican voters. Those are the Blakeman voters, and that's a real problem.
It's a problem, but that's a problem that's calculated. It's the same problem we had in 2022. We had a tremendous out migration of voters. Would you think that they were Democrats that were leaving? No,
but the numbers have only increased. My point is those numbers have only increased.
True.
So it makes it that much more difficult. When Pataki won, the state was already tired of Mario Cuomo in his third term. Yes. He had run aground, and they were looking for a change.
It was as simple as ABC. Anybody but Cuomo.
Exactly. Zoran Mamani is still. It's still a new face, as I can't look at it. It's the demonic smile of his.
New face. He's a new face, but his presence is being felt. And I think we could all agree that this is probably the shortest honeymoon that any mayor has ever had, any elected official's ever had. Not only is his traditionally first test is a snowstorm upon taking office, because they take office in January, he failed in that measure. Number two, he has failed by leading to the deaths of 18 individuals.
Well, that's my point, that he's not interested. He's not interested in governing. He's interested in revolution. That's the point.
Exactly.
And the people who love him, and the people who love him are going to love him no matter what he does. And the other people like myself, he's never going anywhere.
Okay. Unfortunately,
regardless of an endorsement, even if you love him, they're not going to love Kathy Hochul. So one of the other ways that we do have an advantage here in a competitive race is that many of those Zoran Mamani voters, the DSA voters, may pass on governor and go shoot for city council, may shoot for a state legislature where there are a lot of openings and primaries going on, and of course in the House.
Well, I got the signal from talk about going somewhere. we're going to have an out-migration today from the show, as much fun as this has been. On behalf of Chairman Garcia, noted attorney, commentator, essayist Eric Lavine, and myself, Judge Richard Weinberg, we're delighted to have you listening to us week after week. We hope you enjoy the conversations. This has been Let the Record Show. We look forward to being with you again next week on the show. As always, God bless you, God bless your families, and of course, God bless America. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Let the Record Show with Judge Weinberg, Chairman Jesse Garcia, and Eric Lavine.
You can hear Let the Record Show Sunday mornings at 6.
If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social, on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
It's tax season, and at LifeLock, we know you're tired of numbers. But here's a big one you need to hear. Billions. That's the amount of money in refunds the IRS has flagged for possible identity fraud. Now here's another big number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it guaranteed. One last big number. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for the threats you can't control. Terms apply.